Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have my friend, Mr. U of A Wildcat himself, Brian Rimsza. Rimsza, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
It's kind of a somber, I'm good, because you know what's going to happen. I get a chance to get you on the podcast. You know, I've verbally abused you privately, but, you know, our big game that we have at the end of November every year, the ASU Sun Devils actually came out on top, and it was kind of comical texting you.
You're kind of breaking up.
Yeah.
I can't hear what you're saying.
Yeah. I can't hear you. I was texting you throughout the game, and I kept texting, "Are you nervous?" And then you'd come back with some reply, and then I'm like, "Man, it sounds like you're nervous." And then as the game kept going on and on, I could tell that I was definitely getting under your skin. What do you have to say for yourself?
There's not much I can say. ASU beat us fair and square. Your Sun Devils actually just beat the number 2 ranked Kansas Jayhawks in basketball about 5 minutes ago.
Nice. So, Bobby Hurley and the boys were gunning for the Wildcats next, huh?
Yeah, it looks like it. The Wildcats should be worried.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But anyway, had to give you a hard time. It's awesome to have you on the podcast. You've been on a whirlwind tour. I mean, this fall's been great for you with your Doll sheep hunt that we talked about on the podcast and had unbelievable success up there. But then we're fortunate to go with your wife on a great elk hunt in northern Arizona in Unit 23. And she also, her and your dad drew strip deer tags in 13B and both got, you know, dang near 40-inch bucks. And big giant bucks. Had success up there with MDA Outfitters, and then you went with Jaron, and he got a what is he 11 or 12?
He's 12.
Well, and got a bull elk up there in northern Arizona, and so you've been on a great fall season. Why don't you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's been quite the whirlwind, to say the least. I mean, I put my wife in for the best hunts this fall just because I knew I was going to be hunting Northwest Territories for sheep and caribou, and once you know it, she didn't draw 1 tag, she drew 2 tags, and, you know, made for a very, very busy fall, and my son drew a late season elk tag, and it's just been really good. The elk hunt was definitely a grind for my wife, and for we busted hard to try and kill a big bull, and it just, you know, didn't really work out. I spent 12 days up there looking at all sorts of broken bulls, trying to find the one, and we kind of found one that we really liked, and he gave us the slip like they often do, and, you know, it was a good experience for my wife, kind of the first real, I would say, trophy hunting experience she's ever had, as far as she probably passed up 20, 25 bulls. Some great bulls, but I mean, with that tag, you're trying to shoot something that's 350 plus, and you'd like to shoot something bigger, but when they're broke up, and I mean, the rutting activity was incredible, and it was fun to watch, but they were just shredded. I mean, you see a great bull, and he's missing half an antler, half a rack, and it was just tough.
Let's talk about that a little bit. I've actually caught a little bit of flack for kind of, you know, quote unquote, kind of poo-pooing that 23 North hunt, not from a perspective of great rutting and great elk experience, but it's just been my experience that, you know, year after year after year, it seems like the quality has declined from, say, where it was, you know, 10, 12 years ago. And I think it's a hunt that it's hard. You're hard pressed to find a bull over 350. You bring up a good point of them being broke and, you know, finding a bull intact. But I mean, even during the archery season before they break up, I mean, it's just become one of those units that's phenomenal for bugling and, you know, great rutting, you know, great elk hunting experience. But, you know, it's kind of been known for giant bulls, and there'll always be a giant with the White Mountain Apache being right there and, you know, having the reservation border there. But just what was your overall sense? You know, I tell people it's a 320 to 350 type of hunt, and maybe an occasional over that, you know, in a couple-week period, maybe a couple bulls over that 350 mark. But, you spent 12 days up there. What was your sense of the, general size and kind of what you saw?
I mean, I saw some bulls that would definitely push that 360, 370 mark, but they were shredded. Bulls missing third, fourth, and fifth. Bulls missing entire beams. I think the reason the hunt is so good as far as bugling is concerned and just overall rut activities because you only have 15 hunters. So, I mean, you don't have people driving every road all night long, and every hunter, yeah, they may have 4 or 5 helpers, but it's not like a unit like 9 where you have 100 people with 4 or 5 helpers. So there's a lot more people just out in the woods. But, I mean, I struggled. I mean, I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I definitely struggled, and I worked hard to try and find good bulls. And the best bull intact that I found was probably 365, and we would have gladly killed him, and we almost did. I don't know of any big bulls coming out of 23 North during the early rifle hunt. I know there were some 350 type bulls in the archery hunt, and it doesn't mean that there are bulls I don't know about, but I mean, there's been some pretty good guys with tags in 23 North and 23 South over the last couple of years, and nobody's really slammed a giant. The ground and pound crew and some other crews up there always seem to kill some really good bulls, but that's their backyard. I mean, those guys are there all the time, so it's a fun hunt. You got to get out and get after it, but it's just like anything. I mean, I think we lose touch when we draw those early rifle tags, and I really tried not to do that with the fact of since when is a 350 bull not a big bull? I mean, especially for someone who's never killed an elk. I mean, those are big animals, big elk, and that's a big bull, and we all want to kill the big giant, but it just doesn't always come together.
Yeah, did you feel like, you covered the unit from head to toe, is there anything that you would have done differently if you could just have it over again? Is there any one thing or two that you might consider doing different, or would you do everything exactly the same, or was there any moment where you said, "Man, we should have done this," or "We should have done that"?
I might have got a little more aggressive on a few instances. I was hunting with my wife, and I don't really want to rush in and bust a bull out and have to get a shot off at him as he's going through the trees, and maybe I could have got a little more aggressive with that, but I felt like I covered the unit pretty well. I would have liked to maybe have a few more cameras out a little earlier than what I did, just because I was limited in my time frame based on the fact that I was on the Northwest Territory sheep hunt. I mean, I basically got back from that hunt on the 7th of September and, had to work for a few weeks and then go up there on that hunt. But I feel like we gave it our all, and I saw a lot of great bulls. They were just broke, but I mean, I don't think I ever saw a bull that I would say would have pushed that 380 mark. Doesn't mean that they're not there. I just never saw them. Yeah.
From what you saw from the time, you were scouting during the archery season, given the 14 days, I mean, Nicole's a great archery shot. Do you feel like you could have probably harvested as big a bull or bigger on the archery hunt? Not only from a standpoint of, there's less bulls broken, but just from what you saw scouting during the archery hunt, do you feel like there was more rutting or do you feel like it, it's just a pretty fair question, I think, to say if you had the 14-day if she had the 14-day archery tag, do you feel like the outcome would have been any different, or would it be the same?
I think the one thing that I would do on an archery hunt that was 14 days in that unit is I would be there 7 days before the hunt starts, and I would hunt as hard as I could the first week of the hunt and try and get it done, because those elk are not broke yet. They're still getting, wrangling up the cows, and I just think that if you can find a bull in that first week, you can get on him and, get things figured out before the hunt starts, and then really have at it for 7 full days before they start destroying each other. The unit sets up pretty well, as you know, to glass a lot of it. Some of it's not that accessible to glassing, but a lot of it is. And once you kind of figure out where those elk are working into and working out of, it was dry this year, so I think you could have done pretty well on water and things of that nature. But if I was going to have that tag on an archery hunt, and I would take it in a heartbeat, I would be there 7 days before the hunt started. And if I only had a 2-week window, then I would go a week before the hunt started, and I'd hunt the first week.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I mean, getting those bulls when they're fresh and not, haven't been pressured much, that there's a lot to be said for that. We'll probably get into this question a little bit when you start talking about the strip deer hunt, but and maybe you can address it then as well. But I kind of want you in the back of your mind to be thinking about guys that are listening that are wanting to get their wives or their better halves or their significant others, girlfriends, whatever, maybe even their moms, their sisters into hunting. What did you learn over? You've hunted with your wife quite a bit, but these two hunts were pretty high pressure, pretty high profile type hunts. Did you learn anything specifically going into, or after it was over, that you'd said, man, I really learned this, or I really learned that, or I wish I would have done a little more of this or a little more of that in trying to make her experience better?
My wife would have liked to have been up there scouting with me a little bit more, and that was just a product of me being gone on that other hunt prior. And so I would have brought her up there more. She did make it up there scouting with me 2 weekends and got to see a lot of the country. The thing that I always think is important is try and make them comfortable, make sure they have the equipment they need to be comfortable, whether it be warm clothes, a good tripod, a chair to glass off of, decent food, whatever it is. I mean, I just try to make the hunt as comfortable as possible for them because you want to make it enjoyable. And then right from the beginning, I've realized that these are not my tags. Things that I might be willing to pass are not something that she might be willing to pass. And she did really good passing up some bulls, and she had a lot of emotions going into the hunt because she really wanted to kill an elk because she'd never killed a bull elk before. So it was tough to pass some of the bulls that she did pass, and then to harvest a bull that was smaller than the bulls that she'd passed, but she realized that she harvested an older bull. It was a tough deal. She got the benefit of going to the Arizona Strip and experiencing why you pass up the smaller animals so that you have a chance to shoot a true giant, which was kind of a blessing because if she hadn't had that strip hunt, she would have kind of left with a sour taste in her mouth in the aspect of like, man, she passed up a lot of good bulls and she hunted hard and there wasn't a whole lot. I mean, we didn't miss any opportunities. She didn't miss any bulls or anything of that nature. It was just, it didn't go our way. And sometimes that happens.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, she shot a really cool bull. It's, kind of flamed out in the back, all palmated, and a really neat, like you say, old bull. And, I feel like if you got to hunt 7 full days, or 6, 7 full days and get to experience all that rutting and bugling, there's something to be said for that. But I do think, having talked to you on the phone kind of on, through both of the hunts and what have you, kind of wasn't on the hunts, but kind of felt like I was there just because you stayed in touch with me. I feel like being able to have that strip hunt and then realize, like you just said, trophy hunting, it's not easy. And sometimes you come home, maybe she wouldn't even have gotten a bull. There was a chance maybe she wouldn't even got a bull. Or even on this buck hunt, like, you quickly realize when you get a huge trophy that you've been very selective in trying to get, that it all comes together. And, I mean, she probably would have had a really good time on both hunts, even if she didn't harvest. But it's always nice to actually get one. But to go through a tough hunt, as far as mentally and passing bulls, and then get to see the strip hunt come full circle and, get an absolute giant deer. I think the deer's 40 inches. Just an incredible, non-typical deer. Going into that hunt, Brian, coming off that elk hunt, was there anything that you were like, okay, we need to make sure, in your mind, like, I want to make sure this hunt goes a certain way? Like, were you going after a giant on the strip, or were you more just, let's go have a great hunt and try and kill a 200?
Well, I mean, the elk hunt, I had some help up there that, they were able to cover a lot of the unit when I wasn't covering certain parts. So, I mean, I had Daniel Franco up there that helped me with Burnt Timber Outfitters, and so they were able to spread out and cover some of the unit, and so that helped me out a bunch there. And then going into the strip hunt, we hired Breck and Bronson Bundy with Mule Deer Addiction Outfitters, and I've hunted with Breck and Bronson twice now. This is my third time up there on this hunt, and knowing the strip, I told Breck right away, and Bronson, I said, look, I don't want to hunt a ghost. We're not hunting the 240-inch giant that shows up on a trail camera once every 3 months in the dark. I did not want to do that with my wife, and the goal was to try and kill a 200-inch deer. If we saw a 200-inch deer, whether it be right off the road or we hiked our tail off, we were going to kill it. It's just the way it was going to be. And I think that's a reasonable expectation. I think the only place you'll ever go, one of the only places you'll ever go in the world, is the strip, where people will tell you, I don't want to shoot a 200-inch deer. And that's fine. I mean, to each their own. It's just, since when is a 200-inch deer not big? And all those guides you guide up there will tell you stories of guys who just want to shoot a 240. They think because they have the tag they should get a 240, and that's not realistic. And you want to go up there with realistic expectations to go have fun. And I had told Nicole, and we had talked about it, and the goal was to shoot a solid 200-inch deer, and if we killed something bigger, great. If we killed something that was a little smaller, great too. We were just going to go have a good time and have a lot of fun. And obviously the end result was great. But, again, going up on those hunts with your wife or your kid, you got to remember it's not your tag. You got to remember you got to do everything you can to make them successable. So you got to get them out to the range. You got to get them to understand the gun. You need to make sure the gun is on. You got to have the right clothes, right food, everything, just to make it fun and make it. When you're up there on the strip in a dust bowl for 10 days, just having a place where you can take a shower is an amazing feeling, and having a warm place to go to sleep is amazing. So, I mean, all those things make it a better hunt. And, the strip was incredible. Breck and Bronson they run an incredible outfit. And, the reason I hired those guys over some of the other great outfitters is just because I know what I'm getting. And I know the atmosphere in camp's always going to be great. And I know they're going to hunt hard, and we're going to bust our tail to do everything and anything we can to be successful. And, they have a pretty strong track record that speaks for itself.
Yeah, for sure. I've been fortunate to be up there with them in their camps and just seen some unbelievable deer that they've dug up and that their hunters have gotten in. They're just great guys. And, your dad shot a couple big deer with them, and it's always fun to be up there with those guys for sure. I want to get in today I'm going to ask you about Jaron's hunt real fast, but I want to get in today and talk about over-the-counter Arizona archery deer hunting, which you have had a lot of success. But before we get to that, you finished up kind of your fall season, if you will, with Jaron drawing a late elk tag. It's his first elk tag. And were you even more, you talk about trying to make, your wife, you're trying to make them comfortable. When it comes to a kid, do you go above and beyond that even more to try and make it even more fun and put them in a position to succeed and make it more about the experience and, just trying to, share a good time with family? I'm just curious how that went down and kind of like what your expectations were going into that hunt.
I mean, I try to control every variable on every hunt that I can. So, getting Jaron out to the range and shooting, getting him comfortable behind the gun, making sure I've got warm clothes for that late season hunt, although this year it wasn't very cold, and trying to figure out what's Jaron's expectations. There are some kids out there that are ready to go 5 miles to kill an elk or kill a deer, and, that's how I was growing up. And then there are other kids who like to get out there and enjoy it, but they don't want to go 5 miles and basically beat themselves up for a full day. And I mean, whatever the expectation is, yeah. And I mean, whatever the expectation is of your kid or your significant other, you got to try and meet those expectations, because remember, it's not your hunt. And if you take a kid who enjoys being out there, but maybe it's not the thing that they jump to do it all the time, and you drag him up and down some giant canyons for 5 miles and his feet are all blistered up and he gets back to camp, he's probably not going to really want to go again. Right. So I try to keep it fun. I don't have high expectations on size for Jaron. If he looks at it and he says he wants to shoot it, then you know what, we're going to shoot it. I mean, that's how I grew up. My first couple of deer were spikes. You know, my first bull was a little raghorn. I mean, that's how it was for me. That's how I grew up. And so if he wants to shoot it, we're going to shoot it, you know. And so that's what we did. I had some help up there. A buddy of mine had gone up a day early and actually found the bull that Jaron ended up killing, and we went over there, and, you know, he made a great 380-yard shot and put the bull down by 9 o'clock in the morning, and, you know, we got it out of there, and it was just a good weekend, and it's a good memory for him, and we got to go up to Flagstaff and hang out and do some things up there too. So, I mean, you know, I'm happy he wants to go. I'm happy he enjoys it, and, you know, at some point he may be ready to start passing bulls and passing bucks and holding out for something bigger. But right now, you know, he's 12, so, I mean, it's about going out and having fun.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point. I mean, you want to expose them, but you don't want to burn them out. You want them to have fun and enjoy it, and if that means roasting marshmallows and, you know, target practicing and not even going out in an afternoon because the wind's blowing, you've got to understand that you've got a lifetime with those kids, and if they don't want to ever do it again, you're never going to get them out there. So it's better to be out there, you know, plinking Coke cans and, you know, letting them drive on your lap than it is to be grinding. So, I mean, I'm happy you did that. I've seen you do that with them on turkey hunts and stuff, and, you know, let him go at his own pace. If he wants to sleep in that morning, fine, sleep in and come out with us in the afternoon. And I think it's important to, you know, every person, whether they're a kid or an adult or whatever, has their own level of, you know, how much they love it and how much they want to do it. And like you keep saying, it's not your tag. And as long as they're enjoying it, the chance of them wanting to do it more is you know, do it over and over is better. I know it's hard for you know, type A, just charge. I'm sure it's hard to rein yourself back, but you've really done a good job. I've watched kind of how you've done it, and kudos to you for, you know, kind of putting your own, you know, charging mentality on the back burner and just trying to make it fun. And I think that's super important.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I try to do. I mean, I always remember having fun with my dad. I never remember being forced to do anything, and so I try to do it with him. And, you know, hopefully there'll come that time where he says, you know, I don't want to shoot that one. It's not big enough. Let's hike over the next mountain and see if we can find one bigger. And, you know, we'll work toward that at some point. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about over-the-counter archery gear. Now, for those listening, Arizona's archery deer season basically has an August season. It runs roughly from August 25th to September 14th, and then archery deer season is closed, and then it opens back up in a bunch of units December 15th through the 31st. And then when the new year rolls around, it's in essence a new year. Obviously, it's a new tag. So you could technically shoot an archery deer, an archery buck on last day of December, and on January 1st you could shoot a buck, and you could shoot them back-to-back days. Brian, talk a little bit about how it works with you mentally putting in for the draws, hunting in August versus hunting in December, and then right away hunting again in January, because if you kill a buck in January, you can only kill one buck per calendar year. So I know you've had your own mental struggles with, you know, I want this rifle deer tag, you know, should I kill this buck in January so my one deer per year is over with? Talk a little bit about those seasons and how those structures have worked for you over the years.
Well, I mean, August is typically my time to hunt for me. Typically, the scouting for the August deer hunt is done in June and July, which is excruciatingly hot in Arizona. My wife and my son are typically not out running around with me when I'm checking cameras and doing things like that when it's, 100 plus degrees out in the desert. My wife will sit in a blind, whether it's 100 degrees out or 35 degrees out. She loves doing that. But typically the August hunts are for me because when they start, my son's usually going into school, and so my wife's, getting him to school and stuff like that. So most of my time for the archery hunt, a lot of it for me, where it's my focus is in August. And, the water source is obviously the key that time of year. I mean, where you find water is where you're going to find deer in Arizona. Typically when that hunt starts, the monsoons have started to come in, but our monsoons can be very sporadic to where you could have an area that just gets hammered with rain, and then 2 miles north of that area, they haven't got a drop. So I focus on, obviously, water sources and trail cameras and glassing around water on those August and September hunts. That's my main focus. I typically focus in the desert. You can also hunt the pines, and that gives you the opportunity to shoot a turkey in some of those units, and also most of those units have some sort of a bear hunt open during that early season deer hunt. The December hunts for me, usually my year has been pretty busy, and so I get out. The rut is just kind of starting to get going in early December, depending on the weather, but truly it never really seems to get going in Arizona until mid to late January. But the nice thing about December is the season's over in 2 weeks. So if you find a decent buck and you want to shoot it, you can, knowing that you're going to have another tag in 2 weeks, and you can start hunting again for maybe the bigger buck that slipped away or the bigger buck that wasn't in the best position to shoot.
So on that December hunt, let's say you didn't kill one in August, you didn't have a rifle deer tag, and now you've got 2 weeks in December. You're not necessarily quote-unquote trophy hunting. I've seen you in past where it's more like, if you get a good opportunity, you're probably just going to take it because you've got a season that starts again January 1st. You get to start all over again. It's almost in essence like a bonus buck, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's me to a T this year. I mean, I will, if I get out on a decent buck this year, I'm going to let it fly, just because I'll have limited time in December because of other obligations, and I haven't killed a deer this year. And if I get out there and get a chance and a decent buck, I'm going to put a buck on it and see what happens.
Let's talk a little bit. You said that let's back up to in August, you like to hunt the desert, whereas, you can also hunt up in the pine units and what have you. How much of that is just close proximity, to the Phoenix area, and it happens to be a desert, as opposed to that's actually where you want to hunt?
I mean, proximity is everything probably, and the fact that that's what I've grown up hunting is the desert. In the summertime, when you're scouting in June and July, the days are long. So, I mean, it gets light early, so you're leaving 2:30 in the morning to get into places before the sun comes up, because once the sun comes up, it's brutally hot. And so, proximity to me is important just because I can get out more and I can check things more often. And, I mean, I've had pretty good success killing some pretty good deer, within an hour of my house.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking at the regulations right now, and just speaking specifically about the December hunt, one thing that's interesting, and you can correct me on this, I haven't paid a huge amount of attention to it because I'm usually getting ready for these Sonora, Mexico hunts, but like Unit 1, 2, 3B, 4A, 4B, 5A, 5B, 6B, 7, 8, they don't even have a December archery hunt, where I believe they used to. And a bunch of those units actually don't even have a January season. But then you get down into, more of the southern Arizona stuff, say the 30As, 30Bs, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36s. They have not only a December but a January season as well. Has that always been the case? I don't remember Unit 7 and 8 being closed in December. Maybe I'm just an idiot, but Is that something new, Brian, or you know anything about that?
Some of those units they've changed. For example, 21 used to be open in December, and the last 2 years it's been closed. 23 was closed for the last 3 years in December, and this year it's open back up again. So they do try to kind of fluctuate that. I've been told that 21's never going to go back to having a December hunt, and it's not necessarily a bad thing because the unit's close to Phoenix. Guys go in there with the mentality. Yeah, and I mean they're going in there with the mentality of knowing they're going to get a tag in 2 weeks, so they're going to shoot deer that they may not shoot in January. So I mean, for those guys who get the late rifle tags in 21, it's a great deal because you don't have to deal with everybody else out in the field. You only have a few rifle hunters out there, and you basically have the whole place to yourself.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Go ahead.
I don't know a whole lot about 7 and 8. I haven't hunted them myself. 7 has been a draw in the past, and they've kind of bounced around because 7's right there in Flagstaff. So, pretty much everyone in Flag can hunt those units in 7, but I don't know enough about 7 and 8 to really speak about it myself.
You've got like a 20A is not open in December, 17A is not open, 16A is not open. 29 is looks like it's not open. The one that kind of surprised me was 20A. I wonder what the reason is not having a December tag on that.
Yeah, I hunt 20A for javelina, and I don't know what the logic is behind that. I'm sure at some point it had a December tag, but since I've been hunting it, it hasn't had a December tag. But 20C, which is the unit right next to it, does have December hunts. So I'm not sure exactly what their reasoning is for doing those things on some of those hunts. I think that for like 21 and 7, it's probably associated with the fact they're the close proximity to town, and 20A could be the same thing because 20A is really close to. It's basically all the south side of Prescott. A bunch of that country is there, so that could be
another one
part of the
that
reason.
surprised me is 42 is not open in December, which kind of surprised me. Brian, let's talk about during these over-the-counter seasons, whether it be December or January. One of the things that people from out of state that are listening to the podcast need to understand, and I've tried to say it before, is one of the beauties of that is you can actually hunt mule deer or coos in most all of the units, with, say, the exception of 34A, where it's antlered whitetail only in December. Those units are any antlered deer. Talk a little bit about some of the units where you have a chance to glass up a muley or a coos in the same field of view of the binocular, and it's pretty neat to be able to have kind of a smorgasbord, if you will, of opportunity. Yeah,
I mean, Arizona for a non-resident provides some incredible opportunities in December and January because depending on what your schedule is, I mean, you could come down here and if you apply for a javelina tag or grab a leftover tag, especially in the southern units. I'm looking at the list of leftover tags right now, and units like 36A, B, and C, and 34A, 34B, and 33, all the units basically around Tucson, which are all great whitetail and mule deer units, have leftover javelina tags that coincide with that January deer hunt. So it's kind of a bonus hunt for a non-resident because you can come down here and you can chase mule deer or coos deer, depending on what type of country you're looking in, or what animal you glass up, and you get the bonus of getting to shoot a javelina, which are, in my opinion, made for bow hunting. I mean, they're just fun animals to get to stalk with a group of people, and they provide just a fun hunt where you can be pretty successful, and it's just a great experience for a minimal amount of money for a non-resident to come down here and get to chase rutting deer, because I mean, our deer in January are rutting hard. Typically, middle to late part of the year is when they really middle to late part of January is when they really seem to get going. But I mean, you could plan a hunt, a couple days after Christmas and come down and hunt deer and shoot a smaller deer, and then you get to hunt a bigger deer in January 1st, and then you can also shoot a pig. I mean, it's just kind of a really neat experience. I know some people have reached out to me from your podcast before asking about, recommendations and places to put in for. I mean, Arizona's got a lot of public land, so you really don't have a ton of private land issues. So, I mean, you basically can get on a map and look at national forest and come down and figure out, you know what, I'm going to go hunt here. And, I mean, we set up those southern desert units where the pigs are at and the mule deer and whitetails are at. You can basically cover country in a truck and get up on high points just off the road and glass. And, I mean, you're going to turn some deer up and you're going to turn some pigs up eventually. So you may not have to have a hunting hole to go to. I mean, we have a lot of game available to find and get to go hunt.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing to add in there is quail season is pretty much open throughout all those units as well. And I mean, during the middle of the day, you can go shoot a limit of quail, and, really between, coos deer, mule deer, javelina, and quail, I mean, for a non-resident, you can come down and just have a grand old time. I'm looking at the price of the tag. You're looking at $315. So pretty inexpensive. And let's see, the javelina is $115. So I mean, and I believe with your hunting license, you can shoot all the quail you want. Obviously up to your limit, but that's a pretty good opportunity for guys that have horrible weather in January. Maybe, in the Midwest or where have you back east, where they could come out here and enjoy the sunshine. But I think the thing that, you said that I just want to be clear is, like, you can come down in January and hunt the deer in the peak of the rut. Like, it really, anybody could come down and get on a high point in the peak of the rut and glass up deer and have opportunities. And it's probably your best chance to see deer, period, any month is, mid-January. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, the deer activity is going to be off the charts. I mean, this year, I expect there probably to be quite a few deer killed next weekend and leading up to the January hunts, because we haven't had any moisture. So, I mean, these deer are still going to be pretty focused around water, and they're going to have to be hitting water because we just haven't had the moisture.
Yeah,
so, I mean,
real droughty. Talk about rutting as far as when do the mule deer rut typically? And I know, we've got deserts, we've got, mountain areas to talk about, but talk about, historically mule deer rutting. Does it coincide with the coos, or I kind of know the answer, I think, but I'm just curious your opinion for guys that are thinking, man, I want to chase muleys. When is the best time? And then, hey, I want to really get after the coos during the rut. When would you say is the best time for them?
I mean, my experience is with both mule deer and whitetail during the rut is basically in the southern half of the state. So basically from Prescott south is where I've spent most of my time. And those deer are rutting pretty similar times, in my opinion. You're going to get bucks rutting a little bit in December, and then it really gets going in January. As whereas some of the northern stuff, Unit 10, 18A, 18B, those bucks might get turned on a little earlier in December. It definitely seems that the farther north you go, the earlier they'll start to rut. I mean, we were hunting the Strip, and those bucks were rutting November 15th to November 13th. They were starting to get going, but they still really kick it off mid to late November is when it all seems to really get going.
I would say, too, the mule deer, if anything, I think the mule deer across the deserts, the mule deer are going to rut just a little bit sooner than the coos deer. That's been my experience. I don't think there's a huge difference. I think, guys ask me all the time, if you're going to come down and you only have a week in January, when would you pick? I usually say, well, for one, what's the moon doing? That kind of goes into my equation. Number two, I would prefer to hunt them when they're really, really, actively chasing. So, I would say northern kind of Prescott, central Arizona units, I would say any time from Christmas to, say, 10th of January. And then I would say when you start getting in the deserts from, say, Phoenix, just above Phoenix, down to southern Arizona, I would say, from that January, 5th, maybe 10th to, maybe the 20th, 25th. Curious your thoughts on, definitely when you move south, don't you think, more towards Tucson, it gets a little bit later on prime rut?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was going to come down and hunt Arizona, it would be the second week of January. Is probably when I would come down to get a little bit of everything going on. Pretty hot and heavy, and I would, obviously that concerns with the moon and stuff like that. I mean, if the second week of January had a full moon, then I would probably either come the first week or the third week of January type deal. But I mean, I think you're going to see rutting activity in January. You're going to see rutting activity. It doesn't matter. I mean, you will see it at some point in time or another. December, it just depends on what's going on with the weather. But I would agree that the mule deer probably rut a little bit earlier than the whitetail, but it just seems that January is kind of the month that all the deer are getting going pretty good.
Let's talk about some stalking tips for people to be successful that are coming down. Let's talk kind of specifically about desert bucks. What tips do you have? You've been real successful on all of those hunts. As far as stalking, finding deer and stalking deer and making a play on deer, what kind of tips do you have for them?
I mean, finding deer, it's all about glassing. Basically, let your eyes do the walking, find the deer. They're going to be on their feet. Find them, and if in an ideal situation, if you can bed them down and then get yourself moving in on them, whether stationary and bedded down, that's probably the ideal situation. If you can get in front of them, that can be helpful. The one issue that's posed with, hunting deer in the rut is you got more deer around. I mean, you're going to have a mule deer. Bucks can have, 3 to 4 does, or they could have 15 does, and it obviously makes it more difficult to get in on them. The bucks are definitely more tolerant of mistakes made by hunters, but the does are not. So if you make a mistake and the buck catches you a little bit, he may not really care because the doe is there. But if the doe cares and she moves out, then the buck's going to follow. Stalking techniques, it's if you see a buck and he's by himself and his nose is to the ground and he's moving, there's no point in stalking that deer until he slows down, because he is looking for a hot doe and he is going to go until he finds a hot doe. And you're probably not going to catch him. If you get in front of him, if you can get in front of him, great. But if it's a lone buck and his nose is to the ground and he's, either following a hot doe or looking for a hot doe, you probably need to wait till he settles down to make a move on him, because they will cover some country and you're not going to catch him. January gives you the opportunity to use calls a little bit in the desert. Arizona's not real known for it, but you can rattle bucks in January, and you can grunt some bucks in January. And I've known plenty of people to have success with it. I've never really taken to it, but it's definitely something that does work. I know the mule deer tend to come to that rattling, and you can grunt some whitetail bucks in that thicker type country. You just got to be able to get an arrow off, because it's tough. They're coming in looking for you, making that noise. But I would say the biggest issue you have is just more eyes on that January hunt, and the fact that if the deer are chasing or they're looking for a hot doe, they're just not very stationary, which makes it hard to move on them.
Brian, you've been extremely successful. You're also one of the best archery shots that I know, so that has played well for you. But you talk about kind of getting in front of them, and that's a tactic we use on elk a lot, but they walk with the wind in their nose, and they constantly know where that wind is, and they have that breeze blowing in their face. How much do you glass a deer and kind of get a path of progress and try and get in front of them and just kind of wait, because the gravel, because the terrain is so loud? Are there times when you just kind of get in position and hope that they work towards you, rather than you keep bumping and getting in, and then boom, they see you and bump out? I mean, how well does the strategy of just kind of getting in their path of progress and letting it happen?
I mean, just like anything, it can work. I'm probably more on the more passive side when I come to hunting. Comes to hunting deer. Once I get into that bubble of 70, 75 yards, 80 yards, I kind of let the deer dictate what happens next, because especially on whitetails or deer where there's multiple deer there, once you get into that bubble, it's really hard to move and close that gap without getting busted. And sometimes maybe I should have been more aggressive, and other times, when I was aggressive, I got burned on it. But in today's world with your Western bow hunter, most of us are going to take a 70-yard shot at an animal standing still, giving you the opportunity. And so, once I feel like I'm in my effective range, I kind of just let the animal dictate kind of how it goes, hope that he gets up and kind of gives me that shot, or we'll move a little closer or move around the bush. But I have friends that are on the more aggressive side, and they've also been very successful because those bucks are a lot more tolerant that time of year because, they're focused on breeding a doe, and so they'll let you get away with a lot more than they would have in the earlier seasons.
I got a question on my Instagram from a hunter out there. Says we had been talking a little bit, asking about not having success on archery deer hunts. Last year was the first year. It's actually coming from a lady hunter. Says my two biggest issues last year, which was my first time bow hunting, were getting close and not busting them, and then deciding whether to move in or watch them. It seemed like every time I wanted to wait, they would just stay put stay put in the general area, and then every time I wanted to move in on them, they'd head out of the canyon or over a hill. It was darned if I do, darned if I don't. Can you relate to that situation, Brian, and what advice would you give them?
Well, that's the $1,000,000 question. If we had the answer, if we could figure out when to move and when to stay put, we'd be hunting would be easier. But it's just you got to go with your gut. I feel like if I can get myself within my effective bow range, 70 to 80 yards, and even if maybe 100 yards, but I read the terrain, I read the situation as, I'm not likely to get any closer, then I'll just stay put and hope the deer helps me out by moving closer to me, or the doe moves my direction so the buck follows. Sometimes that doesn't work because the wind swirls, but you kind of just have to read the situation you got. If you've got a lone buck at 80 yards by himself bedded under a tree looking away, then you probably need to close that distance to your effective range, whether it be 50, 40, 60 yards, whatever. But if you've got a buck with 12 does and you're at 80 yards and you've got does, at 40 yards, you probably need to stay put because that buck's going to get up and hopefully check some of those does and get a little closer to you. And there's not a very good likelihood that you're going to be able to close the distance onto that buck without getting busted. So I think you just have to read what you're given and try to make the best decision possible with what you've been given.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. One thing I recommended to her as well is I'm a fan of those sneak tech, boot things that slip over your boots that they've got about 1.5 inches worth of foam, and they've been incredible for me on some of these elk hunts. And I haven't used them specifically for archery deer hunting, but I know that it's so loud out there in that crunchy granite in the desert that anything that you can put on your feet to quiet down your noise, because most of the time those deer can pick you out. When you get to that 100-yard mark, anything inside that, they can hear you. And so do you ever use things on your feet as, the old bear's feet or Carlton's super stalkers or whatever, or the sneak tech? Do you use any of that?
Yeah, I typically will carry an extra super thick, large set of socks in my bag, and I'm not opposed to taking my boots off and going in, especially on deer. There is a couple of, the sneak tech ones are out there. There's another one called, I think, like a silent stalkers, which are kind of like a calf height, like moccasin style slipper that I believe you put on over your socks and you take your boots off, but I'm not 100% sure on those. I'm interested in trying those, and I'll probably order a pair and try those this year. But you definitely got to have something to put on your feet. The reality of it is, though, if it's a dead calm day and it's completely silent, once you get in that bubble, it's really hard to be totally quiet because it doesn't take much, and so you gotta read the situation. If you're given, a 10-mile-an-hour wind and you're good, then you can probably close the distance further. But you try and use anything you can to help you out. I have not specifically killed a deer wearing any type of sneak tech on my feet, but I have done it, with just always carrying an extra large, thick set of socks in my pack and throwing those on.
That's good stuff. Talk about when you the deer that you've shot. I know you've had some deer drop down on you and almost jump the string. Do you find that when you're sitting water in August or, sitting water in general, that's more likely to happen than when you're out stalking them and the deer that you've shot, spot and stalk situation? Do you see them jumping the string or ducking down near as much?
I mean, deer are definitely more on edge when they come to water. There's no doubt about it. If you've ever had a camera or sat water and then sat salt that's off the water, deer will come into water and super skittish, and then if they come into a salt lick that's maybe 100 yards from the water, they seem to just be a lot more relaxed. So yes, I've had one of the biggest bucks I ever had a chance at, ducked an arrow on me at a water hole at 37 yards, and I aimed low, but you have to aim on a whitetail. You got to aim under the body if you think that deer's skittish and he's going to jump the string on you. On a mule deer, it's a bigger target. They have less of a tendency to jump the string on you than a whitetail does, but they still can do it. We've all seen elk do it and everything like that too. So you definitely have to just kind of read the animal. If the animal has no idea you're there and he's chasing a doe, then he's probably not likely to duck as much as if he's on alert and he's kind of caught some movement and he's looking your direction.
Brian, I wanted to take a second here to thank the sponsors of the podcast, Go Hunt Insider. Go Hunt Insider is an awesome tool that Western hunters can use to check out and research all the different units in different states on harvest and harvest statistics and draw odds. And if they use the J. Scott promo code, they're going to get a $50 Go Hunt Gear Shop gift card. All they got to do is go to gohunt.com/J. Scott and follow the prompts. Also, KUIU Ultralight Hunting. Brian, I noticed you wear a lot of KUIU gear, and over the last bunch of years you've been wearing KUIU, and I know you like it as well as Darn. I have found to really like KUIU Ultralight hunting gear. I want to thank them for their sponsorship. Phonescope.com, if you use the JScott16 promo code, you're going to get a 10% off any of the Phonescope products. And then the Outdoorsman's here in Phoenix, in Arizona, the Optics Authority, if you use the JScott promo code, you're going to get a 10% discount there. I want to thank those sponsors. They've been with me a long time, and I hear from them and hear from you guys how you have a good relationship, and I really appreciate their support, and I appreciate the listener support. Brian, I want to thank you for sharing with us on your hunts and congratulate you and Nicole and Jaron on the success you've had this fall. And can't wait to see. I know you're going to go out and shoot a buck in December. You tend to always be able to fill a tag when you've got one to fill. With that being said, how aggressive are you going to get on deer in January, or have you gotten to where you just really like that August so much that it's got to be a special buck once your January tag, when your 18 tag rolls around?
January is more of a target of opportunity for me on a deer because I get out with my son and my wife chasing javelina and my dad, and so if I find a good buck in January, then I'll go after him, but it's not, my focus is not deer. It's going out and having fun chasing javelina with the family, so it's more of just an opportunity. If the opportunity presents itself, then I'll capitalize on it. If it doesn't, then I'll look to the August hunt. Nice.
Well, really appreciate you sharing a bunch of tips with us and covering this over-the-counter deer. I know it's been a topic that people have wanted to hear about, and I thought you were a perfect person to cover it with as much success as you've had with it. And I'm excited to see what this new coach at ASU does. I was kind of disappointed. I kind of liked Todd Graham, to be honest with you. And, out of the last 6 years, to be able to beat the U of A 4 times, for me alone, I'd say keep the coach just for that. But should be interesting. I don't know how much you know about this new coach, but he's had a lot of success and such, and former NFL coach, so it should be interesting for sure, and always makes for a fun rivalry for sure.
Oh yeah, we'll always have good rivalries for sure, so it'll be a good time.
I have to say, you're a lot more mild-mannered on the podcast when we're talking ASU, U of A than you are in person. Usually I'm getting verbally abused when we bring up the subject.
Yeah, that tends to happen when your team gets beat, so wait till next time.
Right on, buddy. Well, thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for sharing with us, and I always appreciate having you on and getting that good insight from someone with a lot of experience.
Well, I appreciate being on, and have a good one, Jay, and I'll talk to you later.
Okay, buddy. God bless. Take care.
All right, bye.